Our next question, Jim, sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Dan in Jackson, Tennessee.
Jackson, Tennessee.
Hello, Jim and Brian. I recently listened to the Jake Roberts episode of the Joe Rogan podcast, in which Jake mentioned he got his start in wrestling as a referee. He went on to say he would recommend that same path to anyone getting into the business. I would love to hear Jim's thoughts on if he would agree or disagree, and the subject line actually says, Jake Roberts' advice to young wrestlers.
Well, actually, that's probably one of the better pieces of advice he's given any of the young wrestlers. What was his name? Fred Platt. That was Jake's name when he was the referee, Fred Platt.
That was one of the two names. He had another name, too.
Oh, what was the other one?
Oh, I have it, because I have all the Lil Al Vavasseur photos, and it has everyone's name written on the back of it, so yeah. I have it. I can't remember off the top of my head, though.
But anyway, nevertheless, the reason for that was he was the son of Grizzly Smith, and everybody knew who Grizzly Smith was. He'd been a star in wrestling for 15 years as of the mid-'70s, so they, as they often did with somebody when they were probably going to get into business as a wrestler, but they needed to get experience. They were still in the process of training or whatever. Well, let them referee and get some experience in the ring. And I mean, it's not for everybody. I would not have suggested to Dave Bautista, well, we're going to break in as a referee. Well, look at him, right? If it was visually ridiculous, no, you wouldn't do it. Or if people already knew who the guy was, if he was, an amateur football player or college athlete or whatever the case, you wouldn't do that. But for a lot of guys, that gives them a chance to get in the ring. And especially if there's a veteran in the match, he can see the veteran calling the match. If they do it, well, I guess they don't do that in the ring anymore. But you know what I'm saying? That was the point. You could get a feel for it without actually having any attention on you. And since Jake, had grown up with his father in the wrestling business, but still, as we know, the kids didn't travel on the road with the guys that much back in the territory days, and especially Grizzly's family. So it was a way for him to get some experience in a low pressure type. I mean, there's still pressure on the referee, but you know what I'm saying. And then when he broke in, he actually worked in Tennessee for a few weeks as Jake Smith Jr., which Grizzly's nickname was Jake because his real first name, as Jake Roberts is Aurelian, Aurelian, and nobody could spell it or pronounce it. So he was Jake Smith Jr.
So Jake's talking about breaking in as a referee. Is there any specific job that you think is good for, if you have someone young hanging out around the wrestling matches and they want to break in, what can actually teach the person who wants to break in the most? What job?
Well, it depends on the person. I mean, there's all kinds of...
photographer did good for you. You earned the ins and outs from ringside.
I was about to say, and so was Heyman, Eddie Gilbert. I mean, being a photographer was a way to, especially when you were younger, there was no age limit on who the ringside boy photographer was. So that was a way you could kind of get around the business and, see it up close and kind of, hear things that you weren't supposed to hear occasionally. And even if they weren't ready to smarten you up, you kind of, figured things out. That was good, but refereeing can be good. Ring announcing. If you've got a decent voice and or you are not shy about speaking in public, the ring announcer gets a pretty good view of everything. He's involved in one way or another in all of the matches. And, it kind of sees how the show flows. But it depends on the person, whether you're a cameraman or an announcer or a manager or a referee or whatever you are. You can find ways to learn not only about what you're doing, but also, the other shit that everybody else did. That's what impressed me about MJF. The first MLW taping that I went to early in the day when they were still wiring up the audio and the cameras and setting up the lights and everything, the equipment set up. MJF was walking around in the building. and he was looking at everything, and he came over to me and my God, Rich Bikini. I almost almost started to not name Rich, but Rich Bikini was the announcer with me, and he asked us a few things about television production. And I think we were going over maybe doing some wild lines or something. What do y'all do? Well, we're recording some lines they can drop in, or whatever the case. He was asking questions about everything. And that, that's the way that you figure these things out. And if it doesn't work out, that you're a main event wrestler for whatever reason, you get hurt or you ain't good enough or you don't get a chance or whatever, but you also know how to do commentary, or you also know how to do production, sit in the truck, whatever the case. It depends on the person. You can learn from all those jobs, but you don't just study that job. You study what everybody else is doing too.